why are you making this and who is this for? Because if you don't know why, like, you should be the one making it, or why now, like, you're probably wasting your time and money with whatever you're creating. It doesn't have to be like an impact film. It doesn't have to be this like attacking this lofty social issue, but you should know why you're doing it.
I'm Charla Larston. I've been a TV writer for almost a decade, but it wasn't that long ago that quitting my day job and moving to Hollywood was nothing but a pipe dream. After lots of failures, many mistakes, and many lessons learned, I've now written for 7 TV shows, 2 features, and sold 3 TV pilots. I've done all this through imposter syndrome, burnout, and with zero roadmap. On the Working Writer podcast, I pull back the curtain on breaking in and teach screenwriters and creatives how to thrive both personally and professionally. Without further ado, let's get to work. What's up, and welcome to another episode of the Working Writer Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me once again. Now, if you're someone who's ever wanted to make a short or you've written a short, but you don't feel like you have the gumption or the know-how to self-produce it, well then, boy, do I have an episode for you, because on today's show, I've got Meghan Ross, who is a former Working Writer School student. She's super impressive. She's self-produced 6 shorts. She's been a part of several fellowships, including 2 Sundance Fellowships. And she's also the head of creator success at Seed and Spark, which is a crowdfunding platform. So she's probably the most perfect person to talk to about how to produce a short. And if you're someone who is wondering, hey, why should I produce a short? Why should I go into this? Well, I personally think that it's one of the best things that you can do to demonstrate your skills as a creator. Scripts are wonderful, but it's great to have a diversity and a variety of work samples in your body of work that you can share with people when you're trying to land that next gig. I think it also gives you experience, which is something that if you've not been on a set yet, if you've not been in a writer's room yet, doing your own short, producing your own short gives you a breadth of experience. It gives you a real sense of what it takes to get something from the page to the screen. You see where the money actually goes. You see what it takes to complete things on set, what it takes to get something on the script to really pop on the screen, to be interesting and engaging enough for people to actually watch it. I think it's one of the best things that you can do as a creator, especially if you want to break into TV and film. So I really hope that you get a lot out of this episode. Without any further ado, here's my episode with Meghan Ross. Meghan Ross, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you.
Yes. We haven't caught up in a long time. You're a former Working Writer School student. You're one of the most impressive, you have like one of the most impressive resumes of someone I know who has yet to break in. Meaning
I know that's the caveat.
That's the caveat
of unpaid work.
Yes. And I don't know if you know my philosophy on that, because like my philosophy is that like you don't have to break in to be considered a writer. I feel like a lot of people feel like they won't call themselves a writer until they're doing it for a living. But I actually think that that's just not, I don't think that you need to be doing it for a living to be called a writer. So that's where I stand on that. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think in my early 20s, I'd be like, hesitant to call myself something official, writer, comedian, whatever. But now I'm like, I'm just too old and tired to not take that title credit. I'm like, it's been over a decade. I think I can call myself these things.
I think so as well. I've definitely given you a shout out in terms of your resume in the intro, so I won't do it here. But if you could tell me, I'm really interested to know, because you're you're New York born, Jersey raised, and now you've been in Austin for the last several years. So what's your story? How did you go from New York to Jersey to Austin?
Yeah. I was born in New York because my mom didn't want to change hospitals after they moved to the suburbs in Jersey, so they commuted in for my birth. But my family was in New York before they had me, and then I'm one of four, so I was the third. They were like, "All right, we got to go to the suburbs." Grew up in Jersey, went to school in Boston, pursued. I was on a track to do like climb the corporate ladder in the entertainment industry.
Oh,
I
wow.
studied business and I assumed I was like, I'm not a creative. I was like the good student of the four kids. So I felt like I had to fulfill that role in my career too. And so then when I got to New York after school, was working in like the business side of advertising, I was miserable and I started taking UCB classes as you do. And even in college, I was like, I had my dumb business major, but I was doing extracurriculars that were like in the entertainment space. I like would write for the student TV station and I directed like one of my friends' comedy sketch shows and stuff. So I was always like yearning to be a creative, didn't consider myself a creative. Took those classes, sketch, improv, the whole 9 yards, went into credit card debt, gradually like realized like I need to continue finding a job that is more creative. So my 9 to 5s, like I kept trying to get closer and closer to being the person that gets to make the shows versus the person who gets to market the shows. But for a while, I was very much like marketing, Sundance TV, social media, Viceland. Like I was still in the behind the scenes role, not really getting to be on set or anything like that. But through during my downtime, I would just do comedy. I tried like every medium under the sun, so it was like sketch to improv, humor essays, characters. Then I did stand up and took screenwriting and pilot writing class my last year in Austin. And then when I came down to my last year in New York, when I came down to Austin is when I started filmmaking and learning from the Austin film community. So I was just like floundering and kind of trying to figure out like what is my medium, what am I good at? Like I'd host a lot of live shows. I used to do like a late night show in New York, and then I brought it down to Austin. And so I tried like everything to figure out like what fits my voice best. And then it only took like 12, 13 years for me to figure out, oh, I want to be a writer director. Like that's where I want to fall in. Performing is fun, but it's not like my passion so much as writing and directing is.
I love it. What you said you went to school in Boston. Where did you go to school?
At Boston University.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
not
I
not
went to
not
school
the
in
cool
Boston.
Ivy League.
Yeah, not Harvard, because whenever people say I went to
Yeah,
school in Boston and they don't say anything, then it's like, did you go to
it's
Harvard or
Harvard.
like what is it?
Near Boston. It's in
Yeah, it's
Cambridge.
in
Yeah.
Cambridge, but still, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
I went
if
to
I went to Harvard, I would be writing for a late night show right now, I assume.
100%,
Right?
most likely, yes. Um, I went to a small Catholic school called Emmanuel College when I
Yeah. I know
in
Emmanuel.
Boston as well, which is another very close to BU. And another one that people assume I'm going to say some big school, and it's like, no, nobody knows Emmanuel, but it was a delightful experience.
Hmm.
So I kind of wanted to dig into this thing about not wanting to call yourself a creative, because this is something that really grinds my gears, because,
Hmm.
and I think it's because I don't know. I think it's because I struggled with it so much, of calling myself a writer or a creative before I guess like I needed some sort of real world validation to be able to call myself that. But I have what now that I'm on the other side of it, now that I've been working as a creative for many years, and I have this completely different perspective of what that experience is like, because it's amazing in a lot of ways, but it's work in a lot of ways. It's very much work. And I definitely think that it takes a particular skill set to be able to do it well. But Now on the other side, like I'm like, oh, everyone's inherently creative. And like it's not necessarily about what you're creative in. Um Maybe sometimes the thing that you would like to be creative in, you're not creative in, but
Hmm.
I think as human beings we are inherently creative. So that's my little thing about that. I want to ask, what was it about calling yourself a creative that was so hard for you?
I think I was kind of living with some family pressure, not to like throw my family under the bus, but there was like an expectation around it. Like I'm second gen on my dad's side, third gen on my mom's side. So we've been here a while, but there was this expectation that I was the good student. I studied business. I before I studied business, I thought I was going to be a lawyer, so like there was a certain track in my mind and in my family's mind for me. And my other siblings were more creative in fashion and art, and like, so it just felt like, oh, let's leave it for them and I'll just be like over here crunching the numbers, and let me just be close to the scene. So that's why I took like internships at Universal Pictures and things. But yeah, so I just kind of didn't believe in myself as a writer or as a creative, because that wasn't what I was known for as a kid. But also, it's like, what are you known for as a kid? Soccer, like, so it's just weird to like project like an idea of
Right.
who you are before you are that person. And
Right.
so I think that was the struggle. It's like I thought there was people out there that were more authentically or born to be creatives, and I was born to be like their entertainment lawyer or something,
Right.
and so yeah.
Right. But so you did marketing for a while. We just had Phil Jackson on the podcast. He also has a marketing background. And I
Hmm.
tend to think that people who have marketing backgrounds have a huge advantage when it comes to jumping into the film industry, TV and film in particular. Do you have you
Hmm.
noticed that? Have you noticed things from your marketing background that have, given you any advantage?
Yeah, definitely. I think between my marketing background and being type A as hell, I noticed like the difference in how, like, the level of work ethic I had for myself versus, not to shit on other comedians, but like
Go
in your
ahead.
20s, like I would say it's easy to get a show or get like a slot at a theater. It is hard to get an audience. And so I like, and I have a lot of respect for other comedians that I would like look at as like great examples of promoting their show and getting press. And so I just ran my comedy shows like a business. I mean, it took me a while to figure out how to do it effectively and efficiently, but I was like, we're in New York. It's so competitive. There's so many things you can do on any given night. Like, how do I stand out? What's different about my show? And so we would have this like monthly to-do list where we would make the social media assets, and we would do outreach to partners and try to get press placements and invite people. Like, it was just like this whole thing. And it's, I have a lot of friends in Austin that are company founders and have done startups or makers. And I realized, like, once I like looked at what they were doing, I'm like, oh, I was basically running a small business. I wasn't making money, but I was running my comedy shows and approaching my career like I would. And that was the time where I felt like I was applying my degree in some way. And it also helped because then I like, even though I wasn't a social media manager, like I didn't work in social media until I got to Viceland, because I was running the social media channels for all of my side hustles. Slop Sandwich was like a humor website, That Time of the Month, the late night show. That Having that outside of my 9 to 5 like got me that paid job. So yeah, I was like, I started to like think less about what my resume looked like for paid work, and thought more of it like, yeah, I don't make money doing this, but I very much, this is like taking up almost 8 hours a day as well. So I would put my side hustles on my resume when I was applying for like marketing jobs in TV.
Very smart. Super smart. You've been doing I saw that you did like a Sundance Adobe kind of like fellowship thing where you did a short film. It looked really cool. I don't know. I get the impression from you just from like following you for the last few years and knowing you that you're good at raising money. Is that is that true? Or like for your Here to Make Friends short, like you raised money for that, or was that a fellowship?
Yeah, yeah, it was a mix. I've been like that is like a skill I'm constantly trying to improve on. I think that just like comes with indie filmmaking. If you're planning to direct and produce your own work, like you have to learn to find the money. Like my first crowdfunding campaign, I didn't hit my goal. I did it on Indiegogo, so I collected what I raised minus a bunch of fees. And so like every short, I've gotten a little bit better at being able to cover more of my expenses until that Adobe short, which was the first one that I could pay myself as a director, and I didn't have to put in my personal savings. So, I am good at being scrappy, and for Here to Make Friends, that was a grant from Adobe through the Sundance Fellowship. I applied to other grants. I was trying to like find different ways to get that film finance through my community. And but at the end of the day, like my brother and I still had to put in a good chunk of our money. We came really close to being able to cover all our expenses, and then a couple lines of financing fell through, and we're like,
Oh
"Ooh,
wow.
okay, here comes my wedding gift money towards my my credit card debt."
My
But
dreams.
yeah. So, but
Um,
after that, the Adobe short was my sixth short, and that was the first time I was like didn't use a penny of my own money. I mean, they paid me. I was supposed to keep more of the money for myself. They were like, "Here's the a small budget for the film, and pay yourself this amount." But I was like, "Nah, like if I'm going to do it right, I need all of this to go towards cast and crew, and then I'll like put a line item and actually pay myself." And after that experience, I was like, I am never going into debt again on a project. I am like setting a boundary and a standard that like I should get paid for, especially if it's like a branded piece. But yeah, I don't know if I would say I'm good at raising money. I would say I like it's a survival tactic to be like, where are the funds coming for my next project? Because a lot of the times the indie route ends up being the most achievable rather than waiting around to hear someone like months later, not even have finished reading your script. And so you're just like, I'd rather get work out there, get stuff done, and do it in a more creative way than that like the traditional studio route.
100%. I mean, there's so many people who have so much frustration with the studio route, whether they're, I mean, it's usually like people who have been in the industry for quite some time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
like all I'm hearing lately is just established writers being having a level of frustration with, the studio system and
Hmm.
the network system, but it's a part of it's a part of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one of the things that I experienced, I think, after I broke in was just, of course, the money is wonderful. Like getting paid to be creative is wonderful. Love it. But
Hmm.
if I could complain, if I can complain, then I would say it is the loss of that agency and the loss of that
Mm.
just expediency and freedom and just getting something out because you want to get something out. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I very much consider you an indie artist. At this point, you've had six
Hmm.
shorts. You have the experience. If somebody is making a short or if somebody is doing a project because you've already like run shows and you've,
Hmm.
produced things and you've acted in them and directed them. So you have a lot of experience under your belt for producing indie work. So like if
Hmm.
somebody is either if somebody wants to do, their first short right now, like can you walk us through the process? Like
Yeah.
how do you get started?
Yeah. Yeah. I actually kind of do this in my day job. Right now, my 9 to 5 is working at Seed Spark, which is a crowdfunding platform. And so I talk to creators all day to tell them like, here's how to make your first short. And so I think the biggest thing is one, to first define what is your role on the project. Do you want to direct, or do you want to find someone to direct this for you? Do you want to produce, or do you want to find someone who's more experienced? For my first short, I was like, I want to write. I asked someone else to direct. They were like, nope, you're going to direct. You're capable. Like, you're capable. There's a bunch of mediocre dudes out there doing it. You're capable. And so I learned, and then I fell in love with directing. And that person came on to help produce. And then I also learned to produce along the way. So I would say clearly define like what your role is going to be, and sort of like set that, from the start. Like if you want to try your hand at directing, like, then you're going to have to shadow directors. Like before you get to set, you're going to have to get that experience firsthand, talk to people, read directing actors. It's like a really old book with like dated references to like Titanic and stuff. And then I would say find your team to like help fill out, like start with maybe like department heads, or honestly producing partner is like the biggest thing. Like if you can find someone to help you put the pieces together, someone who's made a short or two before, someone who's maybe connected in the film community, whatever, city or town you're in. So like having that team in place will be the biggest hurdle to reliable people. Ask people around, like find out about reputations. Some of my filmmaker friends, like early on, we had like a Google sheet of people we would recommend working with, as well as like do not hire people. So really save yourself the trouble of having to deal with bad actors, as in bad like crew member, anyone. And then it's like, okay, now how are we going to make this? The financing. The producer should ideally help you break down the script if it's your first time doing that. Figure out like how much you're going to need to actually shoot it. I would also at that stage think like, can I afford to pay my cast? It is nice if you can, prioritize. I would say prioritize labor over hard costs. Try to find the money to pay your cast and crew, and then all the other line items, like try to negotiate a discount with like a local gear rental house, or see if anyone would lend you a piece of gear. I think labor is most important. Keep your cast and crew happy. When you first start out, you're not going to be able to meet their like regular day rates. So everyone's very understanding of like, negotiating down for an indie rate. That happens a lot with early career filmmakers, whatever age you are, wherever age you start making film. But know that like, as you continue leveling up in your career, the expectations for you to pay your cast and crew closer to their regular day rate are going to be higher. I learned that because it's like, during the pandemic and after, a lot of my friends were full-time freelancing. Like they had been laid off by, the production and post houses they worked at. So I basically was buying their time. Like they had to make rent if I was going to take their time away from other paid work to work on editing my short for like 3 to 4 weeks. So I think it's like, understand the expectations of what it's going to cost you, figure out the way you're going to raise the money. Is it going to be crowdfunding? Is it going to be asking, people in your immediate circles if they want to write a big check? If you happen to like know rich people, or maybe you're a Nepo baby and like, just ask daddy. That's not my experience, but, or grants, applying to grants. Like there's a lot of different ways you can get your projects financed. Yeah. What level of debt are you comfortable with? And then from there, it's like, I would say like more of the fun stuff. Once the money is figured out, it's like, okay, you're hiring the crew, you're holding casting auditions, you're finalizing the cast, you're working with the first AD to put together a shooting schedule, you're talking to your DP about the types of shots you want to get. It's, some of those like really specific tasks that lead up to basically like the pre-production. And then you have your shoot days, and then, making sure that like people are fed and comfortable. And, the first AD would be making sure that you're tracking towards your schedule, and you're not going overtime. And if you are, you're compensating people for overtime. And then after the shoot, then you're like, it's never over. Then you're in post-production, then you're overseeing the editor, and from the final cut, then you're handing it off to sound and color. And so you'll work with someone who will do the sound mix or design. You'll maybe license music or bring on a composer. You will have someone do the color correction. You'll do the final export. Before you get to that stage, I would figure out what's my goal with this short. Like, what do I want to do with it? A lot of people will say, I want to take it through the festival circuit. So that's like another round of expenses. Like it costs a lot of money to apply to festivals, submit it to festivals, waiting to hear back. Like I would say from like the start point, like my first short was in 2018, and I didn't premiere. It went through the festival circuit in 2020. So that was all during the pandemic, a lot of virtual screenings. And then I didn't premiere it until I think 2021 or 2022, because it was like, there's just like so much time that passes in between. You have to be done with your festival screenings before you do your online premiere. I had to like deal with chaotic music licensing issues. So I had to like go back into my edit and swap out some songs. So like you should love the idea because it's going to be like, a 3 to 5 year relationship with that short film. Ideally, if you're not just like premiering it online immediately.
How much is around how much budget are you would you say these shorts are costing you, and like what's the length of the short in comparison to the budget?
Yeah, so it really depends on like the concept you're going for. I was stupid, and the first short I was like, lots of locations and extras, and like I didn't go to film school. I wasn't thinking from the perspective of like what is producible. Now I do that, but my first short, it was like a lot of company moves, like a lot of like props and things. So that obviously adds to the budget. So I want to say I like anticipated that short would be between 10 to 15K. And then at the end of the day, with festival applications and all these things, it ended up being closer to like 20 to 25K. And I will say that's 13 minutes.
Okay.
And the first edit was like 20 plus minutes. And then I had to get it down. Festivals do not like super long shorts. It's like not intuitive for it to be like nearly, a feature.
Half hour,
half hour. Yeah, some people thought it was like a pilot, and I was like, no. But I will also say that, it depends. Like someone asked me, they wanted to try their hand at like their first short and do a crowdfunding campaign for it. And I told them, I'm like, do 1 to 2 actors, 1 location. Like if you just want to make a short for the exercise of learning to make a short film and producing it and crowdfunding for it, then keep the number of cast talent to a minimum, keep the locations to a minimum, make sure the writing is phenomenal and the acting is phenomenal, because you're kind of giving up all these other like flashy things in order to keep it more budget friendly. But yeah, it really changes, because then I would say with the short I made in 2022, that budget nearly doubled. Like it was closer to 40 to 50. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of factors at play that cause that. And because I had this expectation that the film was going to be 100% financed, like not through my credit card.
Okay.
So I agreed to like people's like professional day rates. Like I was not negotiating down. I wanted everyone to be paid like equitably. I apply an inclusion rider to all my shorts, so it's always like an all woman, BIPOC, and queer crew and cast. And at that point, it's, I'd made a lot of shorts. And so I was like, I would be, it would be kind of immoral of me for me to like apply an inclusion writer, have all these like Black and brown and queer people working on my set, and then discount their services. So my goal with that short was to pay their full day rates. And then that's how that plus like locations and stuff got expensive. But then the last short I did, they said, here's 10K for you, 5K for the short. So I looked at it as my budget is 15K. I have the confines of the budget. I had to prep and deliver it. Everything had to be done in 30 days on iPhone. So dealing with those restrictions, I really actually liked, because it forced me, and this is the first, and I produced it solo. It forced me to not go over from the amount they gave me. And I, paid myself like 2 or 3K, bought myself a new laptop. And that was like the first project that I didn't have to go into debt for, or be like overwhelmed at like how quickly your expenses just surpass your budget. Yeah.
They add up like crazy.
And that was 6 minutes.
Okay. So I mean, technically you're a paid director now. You could say after that you're it's paid director. I mean, my first writer's room was it was a MTV like online show. It was like for Francesca Ramsey. Like it wasn't like a full like WGA. It was like a like a
digital.
Little digital room like that. So I would say that you're officially a paid director. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And you've definitely worked with bigger indie budgets than I've ever worked with. Like I've never spent more than, but it's also, I also did it like a long time ago. So I don't think I ever spent more than 5K on any, maybe 10K.
Yeah.
Okay. I never spent more than 10K.
I feel like that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Like it depends on like the stage you're at in your career, and the resources you have, who can work for free. Like you can easily make a great short and keep it 5K. But yeah, it's like 100%. An exercise in discipline.
100%. Even the Witcher short that I made, but at that point, that I made that during the pandemic, and at that point, I was like, so aware of how locations and equipment and actors and food and all these things can add up, and it was my first time directing, and I really did not want to stress myself, so I was in one location. My landlord was away for like a month. So I used his apartment, which was very sweet on his part. Shout out to Camilo letting me use his apartment. And so we just used that. And it was like a big apartment. Like people could change in there. We had like crafty in there. And that was a huge expense taken off. And then I paid, I only had 2 cast members. Again, keeping it cheap. Keeping it cheap. And even though we were in one location, it was like inside and outside. So that is what took the majority of the time, like moving inside and outside. And that's the other thing that is so cool when you finally get to do a short, or you finally get to like produce something by yourself. You understand like, oh, this is what takes up so much time. Like it was a 5-page, it was like 5 pages, I think. And it took us all day because we shot inside, we shot on the roof, we shot in front of the house. So yeah, that literally took all freaking day, just the moves. And we only had, we had three cast members, but still super small story, and yet still took all day. So yeah.
It's kind of wild how much you can cram in a day, and also how like what you think is going to be a quick shot will actually be like 3 hours.
Yes, 100%. I will say my big regret from that short, because it was my first time directing, and I was just being so like cheap about it. Like I I didn't want to have to add another day. Like, so I wanted to like get
Mm-hmm.
everything done in one day. I was just like, no way. Because then of course all
Yeah.
my expenses double, because then I have to get the DP for the second day, the sound person for the second day, the actors for the second day, and then the crafty again. So it's just like, no way, we're doing
Mm-hmm.
all this shit in one day. And I think that because I was so like, dead set on getting it done, that there were a few scenes and a few shots that we really needed to do again that we couldn't change in post, obviously, because it's one and done. You either got the shot or you didn't. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing. And it's not like we didn't do things more than once. It was just that there were just little things that I didn't notice that I wish that I had caught, that you just, what are you going to do? What are
Mm-hmm.
you going to do? But super
Mm-hmm.
fun.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely recommend everyone make something on their own with their own
Mm-hmm.
money, or raise money to do it, because I think you learn so much from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, I think that for me, I don't start producing until the writing is in a good place. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that people sometimes jump the gun. Like they'll start,
Mm-hmm.
getting actors, doing all this stuff or whatever. And I'm just like, is the writing there? Are the pages in a good place? Does it read in a good way? Have you gotten feedback on it? So what's your process for being able to figure out, or what advice do you give when you're working with Seed and Spark artists,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how do you know when something is ready to shoot?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely also, that was another area I was a dum dum in for some of my first shorts, because I would be so eager to be like, let's shoot this. And
Let's do it. Yeah.
same, like, yeah. And even one of my more recent shorts, because it was a proof of concept of my pilot. So the half-hour pilot was in good shape. Or in my mind, I thought it was in good shape. And I was just taking a scene from it, or a couple scenes from it, and turning into a short. That doesn't work as easily. Like a pilot approaches introducing characters and has that time in a different way that a short, you do not have that time in. So just plopping those scenes and being like it's a standalone short did not work. And I got feedback that it wasn't working. And so I had to, while I was like, speed ahead on pre-pro, I was like doing rewrites, and it can be really stressful, and changing scenes around. I would say that there's pros and cons to it, because the pro is that I had a really complicated bathroom scene. I was like, oh, how are we going to film this? It's going to be tight, mirrors, da da da. And through that rewrite, I ended up making the short more producible. I didn't need that scene anymore. So there are pros and cons to being still in rewrites on pre-pro. I would say you should have like the general elements of your script done, and the only thing that you should be really tweaking is like dialogue, like joke punch ups if you're
Mm-hmm.
writing a comedy, by the time you go to pre-pro. But I honestly, like, for me, I'm usually making joke punch ups or edits up until probably like even after casting, just like small little changes to the script. And then, obviously I cut myself off at a certain time, and the lock script has to go out, within like at least a week, or even more if it's going to actors. So I would think about like, who are the people that need your script to be more final, like who need to memorize the lines. Um, but yeah, don't rush it. Don't. Some people will come to want to crowdfund, and they like don't really know what the hell they want to even say with the short. Like, it's almost like, I want to make a short for the sake of making a short. And we kind of force them in the process of setting up their campaign. We have like a section called the mission statement. We force them to like think about like, why are you making this and who is this for? Because if you don't know why, like, you should be the one making it, or why now, like, you're probably wasting your time and money with whatever you're creating. It doesn't have to be like an impact film. It doesn't have to be this like attacking this lofty social issue, but you should know why you're doing this. I want it to be a calling card for me as a director, I want it to be something that I can share as an example of my writing. That's not just a script. Like, you have to know those questions before you ask people for money. Because if you can't answer them, or, like, how are you going to convince them? You have to basically tell these people, and these are outside your friends and family. Like, we tell people it's audience building first, crowdfunding second. So you have to convince them that your idea is worthy enough for them to join you in making something, versus making it seem like, just write me a check and don't bother looking at whatever I'm doing right now. So yeah, it's like, yeah, you're early on in your career, but that doesn't mean you don't have to, you can't take, a little bit more serious approach of like, yeah, like, my work is worthy of your money supporting it. And I have a good idea. I have a distinct vision. I am the person to execute on this vision, even if it's like something as like low stakes as like a documentary about like sock puppets. Like, you still have to pitch yourself and be able to convince people this is the most important short film about sock puppets that the world has never seen.
I love it. I want to take a quick break, and then I want to continue on with this sock puppet idea. So let's take a break. Are you ready to join hundreds of writers and creatives learning how to take their lives and careers to the next level with the Working Writer newsletter? Then go to theworkingwriter.com/join and sign up to get the Working Writer newsletter straight to your inbox. And now, on to the show. And we're back. So I love what you're saying about, like, even if it's something as low stakes or quote unquote dumb as sock puppets, that you have to believe in it and believe in its importance to be made in order to ask for money in the first place. But I also think knowing why you're doing something and knowing why it's important for you to do it is important to actually get it done. Because I think, the person who doesn't know why they're doing it and doesn't know why it's important for them to do it right now, even if it's something as simple as, I want a calling card, I want to have something made and things like that, that person tends to not get things done because they didn't have a strong force or belief in the thing in the first place, and it makes it so that the thing is not really tangible and it can really easily go away. So I really love that point that you made. I think it's totally true. And what's interesting is listening to you talk is that you although have not been in the industry yet, I would say that you're super industry adjacent, because you're talking very much like someone who would know how to pitch, a TV show, like someone who would know how to, because when you're pitching a TV show, you're essentially asking for money. You're asking for people to buy into your idea. You're asking for people buy into you as the person to execute the idea. Which also requires that you know why you're doing something, and things like that. So I think that you've just made me realize that, like, I mean, actually, I think we intuitively all know it, that like doing a short, especially an indie short, is a really excellent groundwork to get yourself prepared for the kinds of things that you're going to have to do in the industry anyway. So really wonderful. I want to ask you about, like, so you work for Seed and Spark, but you also mentioned that you are very purposeful about hiring BIPOC people to, or underrepresented people to be a part of your films, to work on your films and things like that. And you also just like very much are very upfront and forward about the fact that activism is an important part of your work. So I'm wondering, like, where did that start? What ignited that in you? And, what has been the response to your work, when you put it out there in that way? So yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah. I feel like there was like three like events or like moments in time that kind of pushed me into figuring out, oh, this is the type of work I like to make. and these are the people I want to make them with. The first was when my old New York comedy friend Lisa Murray and I started That Time of the Month. That was a late night show. It started as just like, hey, we're looking around at the lineups of all these comedy shows in the city. We know New York is diverse. We know the comedy scene is diverse. Why is it like all dude lineups? So we started with like making the priority of like, this is a show for women to get on stage, like really simple. Occasionally we would, get topical and political. I think it was like leading up to the 2016 election was one of the years we were hosting the show. But that was like the primary goal. It was just like an all woman lineup, and also let's like expose this stereotype of like, at the time Sam B didn't even have a late night show. There's no women in late night. So we also wanted to like see what it would be like for like these two women to have a late night show. And we came up with this really silly concept where like every month we would get notes from the network execs that basically were like sexist and all the like really silly, like poke fun at ourselves. And that was our way of kind of like, satirizing the industry and what we were seeing at the time. Then when I came down to Austin, I moved here. It was like a couple weeks before the 2016 election, and the show was on hiatus while I figured out how to adapt it to an Austin setting. And, the election went a different way than I expected. I realized, I'm living in Austin, but I'm living in Texas. I'm not in the liberal, safe bubble of New York that I was in before. There are issues that I care about, but comedy is my medium. So how do I kind of marry the two? And then I started to, like, when I went to relaunch the show in Austin, I was like, okay, it's going to be a show that incorporates women and non-binary people in comedy, music, activism, and small businesses. So in adding those segments, we'd have like a strong female leader interview in the middle of the show. Sometimes we'd have a theme for the show. So like we'd have a 420 show, and that'd be all about like, criminal justice reform and weed decriminalization and all these, we'd try to tie in these topics in like an accessible way. Cause I was like, I'm not like a born and raised activist. Like I don't have those full-time jobs at nonprofits. I was not doing the work in my career or in my life. It wasn't until I came down here and realized like, if I'm going to complain about shit, I better, like find things to try to like implement change even in a tiny way, to justify my complaints. And so using that late night show, that became like my platform for bringing a comedy audience to a show and having them, without shoving it down their throat, learn something from it, have tangible like action items, as well as bringing a comedic sense to really heavy topics, like gun control and immigration reform, with activists in the audience who were like burnt out from doing this full-time work in Texas. So those two incidents paired with, in my day jobs, I started working at an ad agency and then a production company after that. And I just noticed like in Austin, like, and there are diverse pockets of Austin too. It's not as diverse as New York, but the sets I was working on were primarily white dudes because, it's the director of the DP is a white dude and he hires his friends and that's how it goes. It's similar in comedy. So I thought, why are the only slots for women on these, client and commercial sets, hair, makeup, and wardrobe? Like, I know there's women out there in all these other roles. And so between those three incidents, like kind of like pushing me towards realizing these are the kind of sets I want to run. And then Frances McDormand saying inclusion writer in her Oscar speech, which made me look up what an inclusion writer was, and learning about what that was.
What is an inclusion writer? Sorry.
Yeah. So now there's a lot more resources for it.
Mm.
Back in 2018, when I was like applying an inclusion writer, I didn't like have paperwork for it. I just like set that standard for my hiring, that I tell my department heads, like, only give me women and people of color referrals for roles. And so basically it's like a piece of paperwork. It's like a contract, it's an agreement that the production makes like a commitment towards a certain percentage of hiring that's more representative of, you know, the world, like the diverse world, versus like these all white all, you know, predominantly male or predominantly white sets. So you commit to like a percentage, like some people will do like 50-50 women and men, you know, like there's a certain threshold some people will go by. During 2020, after the racial justice protests in the summer of 2020, a lot of I'm laughing because it was revealed that none of these companies are really committing to it, but a lot of the like AMC, a lot of big companies were like, inclusion writer, like we're going to commit to it. The forms became more accessible. There's like I think it came out of like USC and all these great people that were working on it, and basically like handed off the legal paperwork for people to easily apply inclusion writers to their productions, both
Okay.
professional and indie. And so so it basically became a standard of hiring.
Okay.
And all these companies made commitments in 2020, and then in the last couple of years, you know, USC will go back and do data every year to see
Mm.
if the needle is being moved in the industry. It's not.
It's not. That's
It's
funny.
it's not. It's like it's
It's
the
not funny, but
smallest. It's the smallest incremental change, and then some years we will regress,
oh
and
wow.
and then and I've seen like, you know, articles that basically said, oh, remember those inclusion writers they committed to, well, we did an audit and none of that got applied.
Mm.
So it was a lot, you know, for some people it was a lot more talking the talk than walking the walk. But I would say on the indie level, like if you are the director, writer, whatever, if you're the creator of your project, like you have the influence of however you want to hire. So you can tell people, like, for me, it was, you know, as simple as saying, hey, you know, the people I planned on working with as my department heads, I'd say, hey, only give me referrals for your crew for all the like roles underneath you that are women, BIPOC, or queer. And they stuck with that. And then, you know, that's how I like built up my roster over the years, and now have referrals if someone says, hey, do you have any women editors? Or hey, do you have any queer like sound recordists? You know, stuff like that.
By the way, I thought you were saying inclusion writer this entire time and not
So
writer.
so that's what I
Yeah.
thought Frances McDormand said too. And I was like, I want to be an
I was like,
inclusion writer. And that's why I Googled
yeah.
it.
So funny. But glad we cleared that up. So it's basically just an agreement to have a certain amount of diversity on your
Yeah.
set and in your production. Very cool.
Uh-huh.
So you've been in a part of a lot of like fellowships, and like you've been in Sundance, you've been in like several other things that I can't recall at the
Mm-hmm.
moment. But I'm wondering if you've noticed anything consistently uh because these things all like, there's a certain amount of like education
Mm-hmm.
that they give you whenever you get into these fellowships and things like that. Have you noticed anything consistent that you've learned over and over again whenever you've gotten into one of these programs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think uh, the the biggest lessons I've learned, one is you kind of have to make the most of it yourself. Like you may think, hey, I'm receiving this fellowship, it's being bestowed upon me, but it's sort of the same as like if you get a manager, if you get repped, that doesn't mean like you're done, like the work's over. You really have to be vocal, be an advocate for yourself and your work, and continue to foster those relationships after the fellowship ends. I think that's something like I did, especially because I was unrepped when I was in the Sundance Lab, still unrepped. So I utilized them essentially as my reps to take my work out on my behalf. And then the second part would be like valuing the relationships within the cohort. And I remember you brought this up in the first working writer classes about like networking across and not just
Mm-hmm.
up. Because essentially, like, hopefully, these are people you would be working alongside one day, and you want to keep them in mind for work just as much as they should keep you in mind for work if it's, you know, a positive relationship. And so I've made it, it's funny, like last night I was catching up with like some of the women in the Episodic Lab program. And it was just like nice. We're like, we have each other. The industry is shit, but we have each other, and you know, it's just a matter of timing. And because we all have our ups and downs in this industry constantly, like
Yeah.
small wins and big losses. And so I feel like that's like community, and the people that you're coming up with at the same time is has been more, I would say, impactful on my career than a mentor has. Because like what I found with mentorship is that because some of these programs come with like mentors at the labs,
Mm-hmm.
but they have their own full-time careers,
Mm-hmm.
and their obligations kind of like end once you're not in front of them.
Right.
So I've really like taken advantage of like continuing to foster the relationships of all the people that I've gone through all of these different fellowships and programs with, like being honest, getting on Zooms, shit talking, or praising, you know, like I would say none of these fellowships are perfect. They all come with the like the pros and cons of what you expect and what you get in return. Not to diss on any of them. I think like I've been really grateful for all of them, and I've learned something from all of them, and have improved my work coming out of all of these fellowships. But it is a thing of like managing your expectations, especially in such a volatile industry. Because, you know, I like to say that our Sundance Episodic Lab program, we were 2021 to 2022, and we had this big pitch parlor event in May 2022, and we all thought we were going to walk out of there with like bidding wars on our scripts. And it was a month after Netflix announced a drop in subscribers.
Oh
And then
wow.
less than a year later was the strike. So we were like, oh shit, looking back, we were like, oh, we graduated from the program in like the recession of the entertainment industry.
Kind of, yeah.
And it took us a while to realize that, because we were all taking it personally. We were just like, I don't
Interesting.
where like I thought this would lead to staffing opportunities, development deals, and it didn't, for the majority of the people. And if anyone got things out of it was kind of on their own after the lab ended. But yeah, again, I do think these lab experiences are really amazing, especially for someone who did not go to
Mm-hmm.
film school or get my MFA in screenwriting. I learned about the business side. I learned about how to improve my craft. I'm proud of the work I did in those fellowships. But yeah, I did have to kind of have a hard pill to swallow to realize like this doesn't guarantee work. This doesn't guarantee, you know, going to the next stage in my career. What it did do is push me a little closer.
Yeah. I'm wondering then, graduating in the, you know, quote unquote recession of the entertainment industry, which it very much is and feels like it.
Yeah,
Has
yeah.
that changed your, uh, you know, your goals in any way, or the way that you approach pursuing? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely made me lean more on my indie background than forcing, well, not forcing, but like getting so hung up on not having broken into the industry yet, so to speak, because I was taking it personally. I was like, oh, I suck. No one wants me. Like my work isn't good enough. And then when I realized it's actually like a macro issue, like it's happening to everyone. That like I had to adapt my career goals. And so when I thought I would be like leaving my day job, like at the end of the year from the lab, I was like, no, pump the brakes, need steady income. I'm going to stay in this 9 to 5 until like there is a clear like form of salary outside of this through writing and directing. Not going to jump the gun. So my job is flexible right now. I need it to pay the bills. And outside of it, I'm going to continue working on my independent projects with the hopes to attach, industry partners along the way. So I took a break from episodic pitching and like working on half-hour comedies. And last year, I finished writing a feature script with Shruti, who introduced us, that we love, and we're taking it out to production companies right now. They're her agents. And so this is like my first foray into like really taking a script out to get this made, and our first feature also together that we want to co-direct. And so ideally we stay attached, but we're in the early stages of it. And so it's been cool, like having, like, I feel like I have one foot, I have most of my body is in the indie side still. Cause I'm like, if we get passes on this, we will still find financing and
for sure
go the indie route. And then maybe we can find distributors. Like there's always a way to take it from indie to industry. But at the same time, I'm like, just finish the script, get it in good shape, hand it over to the, Shruti's agents. I don't have agents. And then we're working on the next feature. And then I have another like indie docu-series that I'm working on with my brother. That's like really kind of more for fun. Maybe we'll take it on the festival circuit if we, get a cut together in time by the end of the year. But, I'm like, I've kind of sort of taken the Mark Duplass is a creative advisory board member of Seed and Spark. And he's said this for a long time, and he's kind of reiterating again in the last year or two that like the industry, the TV ecosystem is not working right now. And so like he had projects get passed on during those tumultuous years, and he decided to go just shoot those pilots. And he just had a screening yesterday at South by that was like all these indie pilots, because Duplass brothers did it for features. So they're like, we know how to make features. Let's do the same thing with these indie pilots, and then see after if they can get distribution and streaming. Because when they pitched the ideas, like they got passed on, they're like, what? But it was like the state of the industry was just like in crisis. So I look at people who are like way above me, and I'm like, if it's hard for them, if like, the Issa Raes and Dakota Johnsons of the world with these like powerful production companies and deep connections are saying the industry is fucked, execs are scared little bitches and like cowards, and like, we need to take things into our own hands. And I'm like over here, like baby non-union. And I'm like, yeah, okay, like that. Okay. So it's happening for even the most successful people. Then I'm going to, follow their lead and continue down this indie path until the industry like gets their shit together and starts actually wanting to support new voices again, like they did once a long time ago. But in the meantime, I'm like, I'm not going to stop making shit. I just have to find more people with more money than me to help me continue making that shit.
100%. I mean, I think so far you've had such a really cool career, Meghan, whether you see it that way or not.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I, just to say about the, scared little bitches executives, which I'm just like, You know what? I'll give them a pass because usually I'm talking a lot of trash as well. But today
Yeah.
I feel very generous. And I will say that I'm just like, they're as much a part of the, the corporate contraction that's going on in the
Yeah.
industry as anybody else. And
Yeah.
before the industry recession, there was a time when there was just a lot of money and not as much fear
Hmm.
and a lot of
Hmm.
investment into content, and they
Hmm.
really could invest in new writers and invest in uh BIPOC and all these other stories and things
Yeah.
like that. And whether they did it well, whether they did it right is, another story. That's not the point. It's the point is that, because you had said that you wanted, to possibly go into like entertainment law or like, be on the corporate side of the entertainment industry. So, if that was the case, then you would be subject to the corporate contraction as well, as they are as well. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I think we're all just, at the mercy of overlords unless you can
Yeah.
unless you can make
Well,
stuff on your own. Yeah.
yeah. And when I say scared little bitches, I'm talking about like David Zaslav. Like
We're
I'm talking
saying
about
it with
like
love. Sure. We're saying it.
yeah.
You know what I
Because
mean?
like
Yeah.
I understand, I've met, like, as I've like continued down this path of trying to break in, like I've met some really lovely creative execs and people like, yeah, who are working for the overlords,
For
who
sure.
want so badly to be able to say yes to things.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were laid off, during the last couple of years.
100%. 100%.
One of the fellowships I was in was supposed to come with a year-long development with HBO Warner on the projects we had
Oh,
gotten
wow.
grants for, and then they were like, actually, they laid off that entire team,
Oh,
so I
wow.
didn't get
Yeah.
that.
That
So it's like,
sucks. Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it's like the people are just gone from those roles.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like not placing the blame on on the people who really want to
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
the power to do that. It's like these C-suite people who do not care about art, do not,
They
you
do not
know,
care. They do not
yeah,
care. They are
no,
C-suite people for that reason specifically. Unless you're a part of something like A24 or what HBO used to be, which was a company that really, really cared about quality, that really cared about
yeah,
having a voice and a vision. And even that has been degraded with all of these mergers and all of these, C-suite
mm-hmm,
people coming in and just trying to pump out content to keep up with the content wars that now seem to be a
mm-hmm,
standstill. That seems to be at a
mm-hmm,
standstill. So I think that people who have an indie background or lean towards indie work have an advantage right now because their work doesn't just stop because
mm-hmm,
the industry is kind of halted.
mm-hmm,
You're continuing to work and create and do stuff regardless of what's going on with the industry, which is what I think is the best way forward, period. No matter what. It always has been,
mm-hmm,
it always will be forever and forever. Do you
mm-hmm.
have anything to leave us with, Meghan?
um yeah, I feel like I talked a lot of like shop and business on this podcast, and and I, and was humorless because of that. I was like, here's how to do it.
You think money is not
But
funny?
yeah. But all this to say is like, uh, I think the people who listen to this podcast are primarily, the creatives versus the business people.
For sure.
Um, and so I think like the, like you said, like the most important thing is to be able to continue creating, finding ways to create, even if it's outside of industry standards. And for people who, have primarily worked through industry jobs, like to not be afraid of like taking that leap into the indie space, and using, maybe using their connections, having worked with a lot of these like, recognizable talent. I'm like assuming people like who've been like staffed and things. It's like, yeah, bring those actors into the indie world. Like, I think Mark Ruffalo said during the strike, like, we need to be saying yes to indie projects. And so I think for people to know that it's like that's an avenue you can go with, even if you've only done it the professional way thus far in your career. And if you've only done it that way, then hopefully you have some, I don't know, some nice savings. But yeah, it's like it's just I got really hung up on this idea of what success looks like, and that it had to come with this version of me being a working writer in LA. And I've like made peace with that, knowing that like nothing's guaranteed. This isn't like this isn't a typical industry. Like it's not just like med school where you do your residency and then you get the job. It's like it's everyone comes through different paths, and I think we're really hard on ourselves when we don't fit the mold of these like breakout writers and directors. And what I've learned is a lot of those people who you are watching have their breakout moment had like a decade or two of rejections and failures and just like absolute shit times. So like everyone's kind of going through the same thing, and it's nice to talk to other people about that shit and like be like, yeah, like your funniest rejection story. Like we always post the wins, we never talk about the losses. And so I'm like trying to be less shameful about some of my like big career misses and just like learn from it.
Super wise, Megan. I love it. Absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I know I sounded very like lectury, but I swear I'm a fun person. People
then what do I sound like?
Say that. No, I mean, well, I look at you as an authority figure, so I'm like, you can sound however you want. You're my teacher. You're my teacher.
Well, I specifically didn't want to do a comedy podcast because I'm like, all right, enough comedy.
True. Bits.
Yeah. But anyway, absolute pleasure to have you, Megan. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I will say that I feel like sometimes I get a little bit negative on this podcast about the state of the industry, and it's a little bit not positive right now. So I try to be as direct and straightforward as possible, but I don't want anybody to think that it's impossible to break in or that it's impossible to work. People are working still right now, and people work all the time. Yes, the opportunities don't feel as free flowing as they felt a few years ago, but I genuinely think that that's the case for the entire economy. So I want to make sure that I'm not being super negative and that we're not putting out a very negative message about wanting to write for TV or wanting to create or wanting to like tell stories. I think that stories are important, and I think that storytellers are important, and I want to encourage people as much as possible to continue to make what they want to make. And my hope with this podcast is that it's informative and that it's practical, because that's one of the things that I felt that I lacked the most when I was breaking into TV and continue to work in TV, is a lack of practical information about how to really thrive in the industry. So I hope you got that out of this episode. And you know what? Let me know in the comments, or let me know via email or whatever you want to do. If you're like, you know what, Charlotte, you could be a little bit more positive, but hey, I'm just trying to be honest and real. But hey, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I hope you got a lot out of it. Make sure to make your short, okay? Until next time, get out there, get to work.